Good evening. My name is Danielle Enriquez, and this is my update project presentation, Predicting Off-Campus Transfer Student Performance. Here's a quick presentation agenda rundown detailing some of the tasks I've completed thus far, as well as my future plans. A brief review of my project goals. As I mentioned in my first presentation, the off-campus staff has never really tracked student performance on an aggregate level and is looking to get a better understanding on how transfer students are performing at the 5 off-campus partnership locations. For that reason, I decided to include descriptive analytics as part of my project goals, in order to provide the staff with a better sense of how certain populations are performing and to detect any possible patterns. The second part of my project will involve predictive analytic algorithms predicting whether an off-campus transfer student will pass/fail the term. Working with 4 data sources, so far the bulk of my time was spent on pre-processing tasks affiliated with the admissions and term data. I will describe some of the challenges posed by these 2 data sources in upcoming slides, beginning with the admissions data set. One of the biggest challenges by far with the admissions data set is aggregation. Following the advice received in my proposal presentation, I extended my analysis from 4 to 10 terms. Unfortunately, in doing so, a significant amount of work was needed to aggregate the data. Prior to spring 2015, data was accessed via individual file downloads for each term, location, and status. As our locations and number of files grew, I worked with the DBA to establish a direct feed from admissions to the docs data repository, adding additional fields to the report along the way. So, I had to prep and aggregate 28 individual files in order to extend the number of terms from 4 to 10. Some of the pre-processing tasks completed thus far include attribute format, as there were a number of features with preceding zeros which often get dropped on import. I also needed to backfill semester codes for all of the files to identify the term of application upon aggregation. Currently, the admissions data set has 2,285 records in total. Some of the challenges with the admissions data set: the change in reporting features and delivery beginning in 2015 has been a major challenge. The lack of historical data is creating restrictions on some of the new data points that I want to create, which I'll go into detail in a bit. I had to update some missing values from some of the historical data sets that were not passed. So for example, is a community college partner? That field is now being passed, but previously it wasn't, but I can determine that field by looking at another data point, the college STEEP code. And as I previously mentioned, attribute reformatting with those preceding zeros being dropped for unit of reg code, RUID, and reg index. Okay, so these were some of the fields that I wanted to look at for admissions. The ones with the red X are not available in the historical data sets. So that's the bad news. However, the good news is I do plan on still using some of these fields in the descriptive statistics part of my analysis. And again, these are some of the custom fields I was looking to create, and the red X fields are not currently available in the historical data. Okay, so those were some of the challenges with the admissions data source. I'd like to now kind of switch gears and look at some of the term data challenges. Term grade data is not an attribute I can directly access, so a request was made to the registrar. I did experience a slight delay, as the first data set received was incomplete and the second lacked the reg index unique identifier. The second issue was not as alarming, as I was able to construct a new identifier by concatenating a number of attributes. It was an unfortunate extra step, however, I wanted to avoid any further delay with the registrar communication. Again, with the term data, I had to address any preceding zeros being dropped with RUID and reg index. And once the registrar term data was matched to the student and course data, I realized the student and course data is incomplete, as it did not represent all off-campus student enrollments, but rather simply those courses enrolled off-campus. There are a number of cases where an advisor will grant permission for an off-campus student to attend on campus. Ideally, I would like to add these on-campus course enrollments, as it minimally may add value to the descriptive statistics, but may also be correlated to student success. So to briefly summarize some of the tasks completed thus far, I aggregated the 28 admissions data files. I formatted the data attributes to account for preceding zeros. Addressed any missing values and inconsistencies across the 4 data sets. This is largely seen in change in major and major code updates. I verified the updates and merged the data sets, often validating using query outer joins. This is how I was able to identify the missing on-campus student enrollment records so quickly. However, once I go to add that additional data set, I will need to revisit each one of these steps to make sure that the data is aggregated, formatted, standardized, and verified accordingly. As I mentioned earlier, student term grades is not a data point off-campus staff regularly analyze in aggregate form, so it is important to begin by obtaining a general sense of student performance by term. I also had concerns regarding the degree of skewed data, as I optimistically expected our pass rate to greatly outweigh our fail. For that reason, I decided to redefine failing to less than 2.0 term, or withdrawing from the term. So that's where you see including W as an F. And just as a side note, the U is unknown, but I do hope to reconcile many of these values prior to the next update. Okay, a brief look at my future plans. Additional data, I would like to grab that off-campus students that are enrolled in on-campus courses. Format, standardize, and merge that data into the large data set, and I may need to reduce some of the fields and transform the data into a flat file. Okay, so for model testing and selecting, I am going to start with some descriptive analytics for pattern recognition, including more recent admissions data sets to identify any potential correlations with the newer fields, such as the number of community colleges attended, the number of 4 years attended, as well as segmenting by population, locations, majors, felons versus non, etc. Go through a final feature selection, getting rid of any fields that may not be related. Some of the models I'll be looking to use are 1R to establish a baseline, also looking to test decision trees, naive Bayes, and a number of other models to see which performs best. And I say models, if I have time, I'd like to train a basic model, including the more recent admissions data set, despite the limited data points of just 3 terms of data. Testing and validation, I anticipate using 5-fold cross-validation on a number of training models to find the one that works best. I'll base performance on the accuracy of training and test data sets, selecting the model that best represents the data, and my time log.